We're going to build a very simple application that's going to have a front end and a back end. The front end is going to connect to that back end to request some data. The data from the back end is going to get sent back over to the front end. This is a really cool, simple project that's going to get you closer to full stack. A lot of developers start with the front end and they don't really understand, well, how do you get data or how do you do this full stack stuff? What does that even mean? So we're going to build a simple API with Node and Express. Then we're going to hit that API. We're going to send a request to it over a URL. So usually when you go to a URL on a site, you would type in google.com, right? That would go across a literal wire, right, to a server, an actual computer sitting out somewhere, some server farm, some farm full of computers sitting out there in the Midwest or whatever. It would take that request and then it would give you back some HTML, some CSS, and some JavaScript files. Those would go to your browser. Your browser would interpret those, and then it would display a beautiful web page where you can type in stuff on google.com. The difference between that and what we're going to make is a backend service. So when you request a URL, you're going to do that same kind of dance, that little handshake where you're saying, hey, I'm making a request to a URL. It's going to go out there over the wire. This time it's going to hit a server that we control, our computer. And we're going to send some requests to that server on our machine. And that server is going to send back not a web page, but some JSON data or something that looks like an object in JavaScript. We'll get into that in just a second. But that's a little bit about what we're going to build. And hopefully that explains at a really high level what's going on. URL request can come back as a web page or can come back as some data. What we're going to do is create the request mechanism that sends back the data. So let's get to it. Okay, I'm in my terminal right now. I'm going to make a new directory, and that's going to be called backend starter. By the way, the code that I'm going to write is in the show notes, so you might as well just go down there and get that, but you should still follow along for this part right here. Making a backend directory, backend starter. Now I'm going to change directories into backend starter, and I'm going to type npm init-y. What this is going to do is going to scaffold an npm project, node package manager. It's basically going to create a simple project where I can add libraries and stuff to and get it ready so I can begin writing code using Node. Without having to have a bunch of configuration details. So it just basically says, give me the standard configuration for a Node project. Boom, bingo, there we go. Now I want you to do npm express. We're going to install Express, which is a really popular package for Node.js. So Node.js is JavaScript that can run on a server. And you might be thinking, well, what? So JavaScript runs in a browser for the most part, right? Go in your browser and you run JavaScript. You can type in console.log in the browser. But what about on a server? What's the difference between a server and your browser? Well, first of all, your browser has a window, right? And it has click events. You can click on stuff and we interact with the browser. The way we interact with the server is very different, right? We don't have click events. There's no window object. There's a number of things that are different. We have files we can access. We have CPU cycles we can access. We have other servery, computery things we look at that aren't on a browser. So the geniuses at Node.js thought, hey, you're already writing JavaScript. Maybe you could just write that on the server too. So we're going to use Node.js and Express to allow us to write JavaScript code on the server. It's going to make our lives a hell of a lot easier. And if you're already knowing JavaScript, which I assume you are, it'll make it super simple to do this. So let's go into our Visual Studio Code and let's open up this project. And I have it here somewhere. I put it on my desktop and I called it backend starter. And I'm going to drag that into VS Code, open it up. And do I trust the author? Yeah, I guess so, because I am the freaking author. Now I want you to make a file, server.js. Now let's copy and paste the code that's in the show notes. So now I've copy pasted the code that was in the show notes just to get us started. But let's actually go through what is going on here. So first of all, I get Express, the library. I import the Express module, the library. And if we go to package.json, we see that we have Express, this library called Express, which is in this package.json. This is the place that tells us what libraries we're using, how to start the application, just kind of some basic information about this application. While we're here, let's change this index.js to server.js because server is the name of the file that we're going to want to start when we run npm start. So let's go back here. We get the Express library, say, hey, we're going to need Express. We actually start the Express engine. We say, cool, got Express. Let's actually get it started. Let's invoke it. we get a port. The port is going to be the port that we listen for incoming requests on. So we're going to be listening on an environment variable called port. We don't actually have that, so we can get rid of that if we want. We can just put this on 3000. You can try 5000. You can try 8000. I'm going to keep mine at 8000. So we're going to say define the port. Port's going to be 8000. Now, finally, we say we're going to listen for a GET request. There are different types of requests you can do over a network. So the one you're most familiar with is likely a GET request. We're not going to get into all the different types of requests right now. It's going to be too much stuff on your brain to try to really figure out and juggle at the same time. So let's not even do that. Let's just keep this using using a GET request. You send a request over the line, you get some information back. So we say, hey, we're listening for a request at this particular route. So this is going to be running on localhost at the port that we specified. In this case, it'll be localhost at port 8000. That'll be a port on our machine, which is listening for incoming requests. So it's listening out there for these requests. And if we were on it, if this was like a production, a real life one, it'd be in a server farm somewhere waiting on these requests, right? So now we're listening. Okay, cool, listen. And now we can see if it's running. Let's get this bad boy running. So I pressed Control backtick to open up my integrated terminal. I'm going to do npm start. And what do you know? I got a server running on localhost at 8000. Let's go to it. Look at that. Pretty sweet, right? What's going on here? So we say we're listening at this particular endpoint. At this particular route, we are listening. And when we get a request on that route, we're going to send back. We're going to say response, give me back some JSON. That JSON is going to have a message that says, welcome to my Express server. It's going to have some data, and the key is going to be a value. Sure, whatever, right? Completely useless junk. But if we want to make this maybe a little more useful, what if we had a list of users equals, I don't know, we'll have a bunch of users here. I'm using VS Code, by the way. What if at this route, you could get a particular user by specifying the ID of that user? So if we did something like this, and when I put a colon after this ID, before this ID, it tells me that this is going to be dynamic, meaning that we're going to get something in the place of this ID. Could be a 1, could be a 2, could be cats, could be dogs, could be frogs, whatever. And what could we do with this ID? Well, we could look inside of our users array and then get back a user. So let's maybe do that. Let's see a const ID equals rec.params.id. So the params, this gets injected into this request object. Express does a lot of this for us. Basically it says, hey, I get it. You want to make a route. You're going to have a request and a response that you're going to want to interact with. And we can give you stuff in that request object. The request object is going to have all the information associated with the request you're making. Is maybe there's some sensitive data you're passing. Maybe there's a secret API key. Maybe there's an ID that you've specified right here. So we said this is going to be called ID. We're going to say request.parameters or params.id. We can use that ID and we can get, const user equals users.find. This is some simple JavaScript. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but we're just going to find a user by their ID. Then we can send back the user. We can put user, boom. Now let's start this again. We do Control C to stop this and then npm start to restart. And if you find that frustrating, yeah, kind of frustrating. What you could do is use a tool like NodeMon. I'm not going to go over that here because I just wanted to get through this in the interest of time to make this a short, nice, bite-sized lesson so you can go about your day and enjoy some back-end knowledge that you didn't get in college, right? So let's go to port 8000 at 1. Hey, what do you know? You get John Doe. 2, Jane Doe. 3, Jim Doe. How about 4? Ooh, nothing. Nothing at 4. Why? We don't have anybody at 4. If we put in an ID at 4, we'd get something at 4. So we go back to 1. So we see this is working. And let's quickly go over what's happening again, just so it makes this perfectly clear what the hell is going on here. We have some users. It's an array with a bunch of objects. The objects have IDs. They have names. Then we simply say, app, you're going to be listening for a GET request. You're going to be listening for a GET request at this particular URL. So we're at localhost 8000 / the colon means dynamic, means that you could put in whatever you want. I'm going to take that thing, that whatever you want thing, could be cats, rats, bats, dogs. cats, rats, bats, dogs, I don't know. But really, it should be like 1, 2, 3, right? So maybe it'll be a 1, maybe it'll be a 2, maybe it'll be a 3. Then I'm going to look inside the user's array, and I'm going to find any user which matches the ID that you've passed in that URL. And then if I find it, I'll give it back. What if I don't find it? If no user, what about then? Maybe we'll do that. Yeah, I like that. Now we can stop it, and start it again. By the way, I'm pressing up to go back to the last command in my terminal. That'll save you a little bit of keystrokes, right? So, okay, we got John Doe. We got Jane Doe. And then we got, let's put in frogs. Haha, frogs. Oh, message user not found. Excellent. Now we're cooking, my friends. Cool. You see how simple that was to get that just up and running? By the way, if you want to debug this kind of stuff, you could simply put console logs and put rec.params.id or whatever, you could see what's coming in here in this request object. I'll stop this and start this yet again, and we will just refresh the page, and we go back here, and we see we have frogs in here. Now I will go back and change this to 1, and you'll see in here that we have a 1 inside here now in our terminal. So this is cool. This is a server that we have. I mean, we are the server, just our local machine. Now, the problem here is that we can't expose this to other people on the web for security reasons. We can't allow our port on our machine to be publicly accessible for many reasons. Because imagine if you could just give access to your computer over a port to somebody really easily. Terrible idea, right? People could go in there and do sorts of awful things to your computer that you probably don't want. So don't be worried that somebody can actually get into your computer doing this. They cannot. Now we have this down. Now let's do the front end. And we're going to do a brand new app for the front end. So let's go back to our terminal. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to cd into, let's think, front end starter. I'm so clever, aren't I? Front end starter and cd into front end starter. The hell, didn't I just do that? I thought I just made a front end starter thing. Make dir front end starter. Okay. Now cd into front end starter. Now I'm going to touch a few files, not in a creepy way, like in a totally consensual way. Touch index.html. And how about I touch app.js? How about that, huh? Now let's open that bad boy up. So let's do our front end starter. Let's open that up in here. And we'll make a basic page. Hell yeah, I trust the author because I'm the author. So seems reasonable, right? Let's do this. Let's make a button that makes a request to the server and then displays that information on the screen. Seems pretty simple, right? Seems like a cool thing to do, huh? So let's put like HTML, put a head, blah, 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 blah. All right. I'm scaffolding. Welcome to I don't want any of this stuff. We'll put an H1 and we'll put like, my app. I don't know, sure, right? If I can type my app and sorry, microphone's in the way. I usually would type much, much faster than this just to get nervous with the mic in the way. Yeah, that's what's going on, right? Button, click me, and the button is going to have an ID of button. I'm a clever young guy, right? I'm a clever young boy. And then we're going to have a script tag, and that script is going to be not for jQuery. Geez, this is funny, isn't it? This is like what GitHub Copilot is spitting out, meaning a lot of you are out there using jQuery, because why else would it offer me jQuery as a thing to put in the script tag? Obviously, I'm not using that, you dumb. App.js. We're hooking up our HTML to our JavaScript file. We're saying, hey, I want you to load this JavaScript file because we're going to need that. We're going to need the JavaScript file to do JavaScripty things. Now we have our front end application. Remember, our back end one is a server, our machine, waiting for a request, waiting for somebody. It's like, please give me something I can do. Give me a request. And we're going to satisfy that server. So satisfying so soon. Watch. We're going to put a button and we're going to put an output here. And let's split the screen. Let's open up app.js. By the way, if you see me flying around here, I'm just using some keyboard shortcuts. This is a thing that you probably should learn as well. I'll have a video on that as well too. Let me know if I should do a video on that. If you like that, drop a comment. Let me know. Like, do you want a quick video on VS Code shortcuts because a lot of you could use it. I bet. Guaranteed. Okay, app.js. So we'll do this. We'll do const btn equals document.getElement by ID button. And we'll do button add event listener click. So when a user clicks on the thing, look at this terrible code here. This is just funny. This is the stuff you guys are writing out here. This is embarrassing. Who the hell would write this? Losers. Anyway, let's put some real code in here. Some sexy code, much sexier than whatever these people have been writing. This is awful. God awful. But hey, no judgment, or a lot of judgment actually. Let's do this. We're going to fetch, not Chuck Norris, 3000. Remember, we're at port. What port are we at? As a reminder, we're at port 8000. And we're going to do port 8000 and fetch dot then. So fetch returns a promise. That promise returns some JSON. And then the data we get back, we're going to console log the data. That's not great code, but it's still a lot sexier than the other junk we saw. And that was disgusting stuff. So I like to do this. I like to just see what happens if we click the button. Do we actually get a response? Now remember, we're expecting something here like cats, rats, frats, dogs. Let's just hard code this to 1. And something you can do on your own to take this project a step further and really make it your own, which I'm not going to show you, is how do you request a different user? How could you make it so that you can request 1 or 2 or whatever? Could you have a drop down? Could you have an input box? Think about that. That would make this project not only your own, but you'll learn a lot more from doing that. So let's take a look at what happens. This is, by the way, is what I consider boilerplate code. We have a fetch request, which goes out, makes a request at the URL that we specified. Remember, we're the ones that specified that this is, in fact, the place where we should be expecting requests. We gave it 1 in this dynamic part of the URL because 1 is going to specify the ID of the user that we're going to want to get. Let's see if this thing works. I'm going to go in here, front end starter, and I'm going to open this up in here. And then I'm going to open up the DevTools. Geez, having it in light mode is like killing my eyes. I'm just a stereotypical developer here. Click. Okay. Didn't fail. Null origin has been blocked. A CORS error, which is exactly what I was hoping to see, honestly. CORS error means that, hey, you're trying to connect to a domain that is not the same one as the one you're currently on, right? So you're trying to connect to something at localhost 8001, but you're at a file here. You don't share the same domain. It's like if I was on dogs.com trying to request an API on cats.com. It'd say, wait, dogs.com is different than cats.com. There's a cross-origin resource sharing issue here. You can't do that. If you were on dogs.com and the API was on dogs.com, I'd have no freaking problem with that. But you're not. You can't just do that unless you make it so. So let's go back to our server and let's make sure we have some CORS stuff going on here. And let's kill this off. Let's npm I CORS. So I could be bumbling around looking for how to do this, or we could just ask ChatGPT. So let's just freaking do that. So how can I whitelist all domains in my Express application? Come on, give me some sweet, sweet knowledge, ChatGPT. Let us know. Look at that. Okay, perfect. That's all I needed to know. So we already have CORS installed. Now we're just going to do app.use CORS, and we're just going to let all domains just have at it, just go straight, get right to it. Cool. So let's just do that. So we're going to app express, and then we're going to say app.use CORS. Boom. We're going to kill the server, and then we're going to start the server. Now let's go back to our front end here. Click me. And what do you know? We got a 200 response now. Cool. We get the response. We look at the preview of the response and we see we get a user object and the user has John Doe inside of it with an ID of 1. Now we want to display that data on the screen. So let's do that last piece of it. And then we're kind of done for what we need to do right now. We'll look at how you could take this a few steps further as well. So instead of just console logging the data, let's actually append it to the screen. So let's do const output equals document get element by ID output, which we've identified right here. And then we're going to do this. What are the pieces we want to show on the screen? Maybe just the username. And how would we get that? By looking at the user dot name. The user is an object and the name is a property on that object. Let's go in here and get that cracking. So we're going to do output dot inner HTML equals, and I'll just do this. I don't know, h1 data dot name. Yeah, that seems cool. I don't know, why not? Let's just do that. Let's make it an H1 and call it terrible, terrible thing to do, but whatever. Let's have some fun. Click me, undefined, undefined. Oh man, let's go back. Why would that be undefined? Oh, I think it'd be data dot user dot name. Okay, let's try that out. Let's see if we get that. Click me. We'll refresh first of all. John Doe. What? Ah, look at us. Look at us. Right? Now, this is overly trivialized example, right? I mean, completely useless. Now, how do you take this a step further to make it actually somewhat useful? One, hooking your backend up to a database, because we have essentially some data right here, which is not too off or different than what you'd see in a database. So maybe the next step is literally just hooking this up to something like MongoDB, SQL, Supabase, having a lot of data in a table, and then showing it. Or maybe you just expand the data you have to make it more interesting and have a bunch of like flat data, like a flat data file. You could put a CSV file in here and then dig through that. Maybe you have like something at your work you're using, like an Excel spreadsheet, and you want to just add that in here as a flat static file and then use some code to dig through that file to find stuff. That'd be cool too. And then it's really about how do you display that information on the front end. This goes through the entire kind of idea from front end to the back end. So now we've set up our own back end. We have it listening for requests at this particular URL, at this particular port, 8000, and for this particular ID. We change this to 2, we'll see it go. So that is how you can extend this project, make it your own, and actually do something kind of cool. So we have John Doe, Jane Doe. Yeah, make it your own, play around with it, see you can get, and check out the show notes. And if you want to go a little bit further, there's a more advanced Express Node project than the one we set up here. This is not how I would set up like a production level Node Express app, but it is a really good way to just get started, dig through, see if you can figure it out, change some stuff up, break some stuff up, make it yours. Hope that was helpful. See you around.